I am Angerfist. I make hardcore music. I've been doing so for the last 20 plus years. I would describe my music as energetic, aggressive, sometimes violent, sometimes dark, dramatic, but in essence and the basic of the music is hard, aggressive, uplifting hardcore music. It's just a type of style that I really like and that I want to bring to the people. And when I see this new generation of kids, they like it that much and they have that tattoos wearing masks at the parties. It's like a very solid and fanatic following. I mean, there's not really like any deep message. It's just the music I like that I started making many years ago that I still do, the type of melodies that I still like, the kicks I like. And that for me is just like that keeps me going. I started making hardcore music when I was 16, about 16, I think. I bought a computer. I started with very basic software because I was interested in making music. I started with very simple, basic sample-based stuff. After a while, I got bored with that. I started using Fruity Loops back then, FL Studio, started making my own melodies, my own kicks, slowly started to develop a sound. And later I switched to Cubase, which I still use today. My first releases were on Fruity Loops. What motivated me to start making music? One time I was walking in a store and I saw a piece of software lying down. I didn't even own a computer back then, but I saw a piece of software that said you can make your own music, which was like very childish, simple software. And I got intrigued because I always liked music. From when I was very small, I liked all kinds of music. I got intrigued by the software. I guess I bought it. I bought a computer and started making music. I don't know why. It was just something I was interested in and wanted to do. And the moment I started, I got hooked. I haven't stopped making music since. My style is hardcore music. I remember the first time I saw an ad on TV for the very first Thunderdome CD back in the day when I was small at my parents' house. I was instantly, hooked to this music, this aggressive new music that I never heard before. A couple of years after, when I actually bought the software and started making music, I tried to make this kind of music. And slowly it started growing and it became good enough to send it out to record labels. I guess one of the barriers was that my parents not really approved of this music, even though I was very focused on actually sending out demos to labels and trying to make something out of this music. First, they thought, you need to go to school, you need to do normal stuff, get a job and stuff like that. And I was always focused on making music. It's just that they didn't see me having any big success with this music because, who thinks of their kid when they just start messing around with some kind of music that he will be something that it will be something successful. But after a couple of years and I started getting gigs and I started getting recognition for the music, they started to see that, hey, it's actually possible to doing something successful with this music. So just had to grow a little bit and they had to see it could be a successful project and eventually it became something. Also, my parents were at a couple of my events, the solo nights that I did. My parents came by a couple of times and they could see it with their own eyes, what it is, because for them, it's like alien music that they don't understand. But this way they could see it and see what I'm actually doing in the weekends, So this was one of the barriers. But for the rest, I was just making music, having fun. The barriers were not that hard, actually. When I started, the hardcore scene was pretty much dead. So we had the 90s, which was high BPM rave music. That kind of died at the end of the 90s. And I started in the beginning of the millennium. And the market was small. There was just a few artists still going strong. And that's when I went into the hardcore scene. Nowadays, there's a huge scene. There's many new kids coming up constantly. There's new artists all the time. And I can imagine now it's more difficult to get a contract or to get recognized. You need to really do something different to stand out from the rest because there's so many artists, so much music. I guess for me back in the day, it was easier to go into the scene than it is now. I can understand for upcoming producers or bedroom producers that are trying to get signed or get a contract, just get their music in the spotlight, that it's sometimes difficult. And maybe your parents are not with you, they're against it, and they want you to go to school, or want you to go take a job or whatever. I mean, it is possible to do both. Just do it the smart way. I mean, you can combine these things and still make music and do what you're passionate about. When I started making music and started coming in contact with record labels and guys that wanted to sign me, because there were a few of them back in the day, I mean, there were no tutorials, there was no YouTube sample portals or whatever. You had to basically do most of it yourself, try to figure out how to sound design, how to edit, master, mix, whatever. Of course, there were a couple of guys like Mark, Outblast. I was in contact with him a lot when I started at Master of Hardcore. DJ Buzzfuzz, he signed my first record ever under Menace to Society on his Berserk Records. And he got me in connection with Master of Hardcore. Bass D taught me some tips in the beginning, how to change my tracks, make the kicks better, whatever, details like that. But in the end, most of it I did myself just by, practicing all the time. The best way to do it, I think. Don't instantly go to a YouTube tutorial, but you can also just, get in the zone and try to figure it out yourself. If I could speak to my younger self, even though I always did what I like and I always do the style that I like, pay less attention to people around you that are negative, like haters or people say that your style is not good or your music is not good. I remember when I was younger, I was really affected by this. So if I would see hate comments online or stuff like this, I would always be affected by it. I would think like, I have to change my style because this and this guy, some dude online doesn't like my style, which makes no sense at all. You should just do what you like yourself and focus on that, and stop focusing on what other people think. Social media has had a good impact. The fact that it has spread the music worldwide, hardcore music. Back in the day, it was mostly Holland, Italy, and just a little bit of Germany, a little bit of Belgium, but it was mostly that. But because of social media, like especially YouTube in the beginning, you could put videos online and show the whole world that this music existed. A lot of artists focus so much on socials, and also even promoters and organizers from events focus on socials. Like how many likes you got, how many comments you got on a post, how many followers. And in the end, I wonder how much that really matters. I mean, I guess if you have like 100,000 followers on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, I guess it says something. On the other side, you could also just go to a website, buy a bunch of likes, and people will think that you're famous. And you go on stage and you play some garbage and nobody's dancing. In the end, what matters is the music for me still. After all these years, social media is just like something on the side, and the music is the core for me as an artist. If I would have to start over now, this time compared to back in the days, there were no socials. There were just some forums online. Internet was pretty new. Nowadays, socials are very important. I realize that even though I'm not a big fan of the socials. I mean, I understand it's a big part of being an artist, but the core is still the quality of your music. So be unique, create your own sound. I mean, you can make something like completely crazy and it will not be a success, but if you make something that you really believe in, are passionate about, this is what is the most important thing about your music. Socials and everything is important nowadays. I get that, but it's still a side thing for me. I would focus on the music first, even though they are important elements nowadays. The music is still the core. Sometimes it's difficult to balance DJ life with home life, family life, because I also have a studio at home. I have a little girl, a wife and a little girl. And sometimes it's difficult to have your studio at home because my daughter would just come walking in and she wants her attention. And I just cannot just say like, go and let me make music. It doesn't work like that. So it's difficult sometimes, but it's doable. I mean, you can do home life. You can combine it with your tour life if you just stay focused and stay fresh and give your family the proper attention, What I do in the studio is I'm always trying to keep up with what is new and fresh, always new plugins. I always keep an eye on what's happening. I don't try to like focus too much on the past, even though I have a certain style and melodies and structure of the tracks, I guess. I'm not afraid to use new kicks or new elements that are now fresh because I like to experiment with new sounds and I guess trends which are now happening in the hardcore scene. I just try to combine my own style and just keep it refreshed with what's going on right now. After all these years, sometimes it can be difficult to get inspired because sometimes the music style that is popular in the scene is not really my style, but I always try to stay close to what I like, my type of melodies, my type of atmospheres, and my mindset hasn't changed since the beginning. It's just my style. I try to keep it updated, of course. I like to try new things, try new kicks, new tricks, new drops, whatever. but in the core, it's always the same Angerfist style. Sometimes after so many years and after years of success, I guess, sometimes I feel that I've kind of reached the ceiling because for hardcore music, I don't know how much more there is to achieve, but I'm always trying to get on new stages, new events, and show the world that this kind of music exists. Because it's still, even though hardcore and hard dance music is big, it's still a niche market and a niche style. When I have a studio day planned, usually I get up early, open Cubase, and what I start with most of the time is the melody and the break. My first go-to when I make a new track. Usually, or it's more dramatic and sad, which I really like, or it's more dark. So it just depends on the mood which I'm in. Sometimes I like to start with, sad chords or just like a dark atmosphere. It just depends on my mood. But I always start with the break. I mean, usually you have like the build up, the mid intro, the screech, the kicks and everything. I mean, kicks are of course very important. All the elements are important, but my favorite part is the break. You can put the most feeling into the break, I guess, and you can build so much around. You can make like a cool melody, which is like the main core of the track. And you can build so much around these notes, with strings, pads, whatever, choirs. Just build a whole track around and the whole atmosphere around this melody. What comes out really depends on my mood. If I have a bad day, it depends on what kind of bad day I have. It can be a very aggressive track, or it can be very sad minor chords that come out. But usually it very much depends on how did I sleep, what happened the day before, what happened the week before, whatever. All these things influence you when you're in the studio. Yeah, these things play a big part when you're making music because music is emotion and it's all emotion related when you're in the studio. So one of the first things that I open is a Spire or a June or a Serum or something like that for the main lead. And I start messing around with the notes. I'm not really a keyboard kind of guy. I don't know how to actually play. So I do everything with the mouse. And I know which notes to choose usually. Sometimes I try different combinations. It has to be a certain type of melody. Try to not make it too friendly or too happy. I don't really like that. So it has to be kind of minor or, like I said, sad or dark. After that, when I build a nice melody, I start to use the chords from the melody for choirs, pads, strings, stuff like that. Low saws, drones, stuff like this to create a certain atmosphere around the melody. Other music genres inspire me. I can listen to what I really like is like 90s hip hop, gangster rap, stuff like this. These kind of melodies that they use are very monotonic, but catchy and very fitting with my style. I also like to use hip hop breaks in my tracks. Movies can be inspiring, especially horror movies when they have like this dark atmosphere in there. And sometimes they have like a really cool soundtrack, which can inspire you to make something similar. Sometimes something just pops into your head, you're in the car or in the shower or in whatever, just sometimes something pops into your head. And the first thing you got to do is go into the studio and open Cubase and try to catch this melody. Or what I do also is like use my iPhone, put on a voice memo to make sure I don't forget about it. And I sing the melodies which are in my head. And then later in the studio, I open my voice memo and I listen to this terrible man singing. But I mean, I can at least hear the basics of the melody that I wanted to recreate with a proper synth and a proper atmosphere, But I use voice memo a lot. And I know it's a fact that many artists use this. I know many colleagues that do the same thing. These voice memos are things that never should be out in the open and nobody should ever hear this. The next step after the break, when I have a proper melody and a proper atmosphere and a proper like strings, pad, choirs, whatever, I start doing percussion and start building up the track, which is usually kind of like a basic build up. So like claps, snares, percussion, rides, stuff like this, crashes. Most of the time I have like a whole folder with all kinds of kicks that I made throughout the years. Back in the days, I was always using Microtronic to make kicks, start tweaking, with filter bank and EQs and distortions and like this whole chain of plugins straight from the 909 or from the Microtronic. And you start editing live from the plugin. Horrible task. It could take you days, but nowadays it's mostly sample based and people reusing tails, reusing punches. You just try to relayer them and resample them, put reverb on a punch, sample this, put distortion back on this. They're much more squeezed, much more compressed, and you can easily reuse tails and punches because of all the different type of kicks that you have now. So this is the process of the kick for me. compared to the early days when it had to be a certain sound. And now you can do anything you want, basically. Kick wise, I mean, you can just have a housey punch and a hardcore tail, or you can just have like a raw style punch, a clean sinus sub tail. Doesn't matter anymore. That's what is cool about these days, that you can go way beyond what hardcore kicks used to be. You can go much deeper than before. What makes a track a hit? Nobody knows, because otherwise you would make hits every release, and this doesn't happen. But it's a good thing, because you don't want it to be some sort of formula, and you can make hits all the time. That's also what's exciting about it. If you make a track and you think like, wow, this melody is amazing, this kick's amazing, this drop is perfect, even though you might feel this way, it doesn't mean that it becomes an instant hit, because some of the tracks I made, I was convinced it was going to be a hit, and it did nothing. So there's nothing to pinpoint what makes a hit. But like I said, it's a good thing, because you don't want only hits. You want all kinds of music out there. And then sometimes one of those tracks peaks out and becomes a hit. That's also what's exciting about it. When I make tracks, of course, I have a certain workflow. I have synths that I always use. I basically always use a nice choir, which is the Requiem choir, which I have in Contact. And I always like to use this one. If I compare how much time it takes right now to make a track compared to back in the days, it depends, because there are tracks that I made in one day that became hits. Maybe the sound quality wasn't that good, or I didn't pay much attention to it. I didn't really have a feeling with it. I just made a track, and one day I thought, no, that's all right. Just going to put it on the B side of the EP, and the A side is going to be something I properly worked on. Back in the days, I don't know. It depends. Sometimes it can take you a week, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks if you go crazy. A couple of days. Sometimes nowadays, it doesn't take a couple of days anymore, because the mixing and mastering has become so pro in the hardcore scene that it's like, it's such a high level that you can just go endlessly crazy on the small details. The average listener will not even hear. But as the producers, you are like perfectionist. You're trying to make the best of it, and you focus on these small details. And it's mostly mixing and mastering that take most of the time. So nowadays it will take me 1, 2, 3 weeks to make a track. I don't really use any templates. I just, I do have channel presets. For instance, if I have a bunch of leads that go into a group, and I put there one of the presets, like a reverb, some EQ, delay, compression, stuff like that. So I can just, by one tap, I can put it on the group. But I don't really have any lead templates like I always have the same group of leads, because everything will always sound the same. So I kind of try to avoid that. So I don't really have a template like that, but I do have channel presets, for instance. I do sometimes make other types of music as well in the studio, even though sometimes it's not for release, it's just for fun. I like to make hip hop beats sometimes. I recently did a new hip hop beat for MC Knowles. He's an MC in the hardcore and hardstyle scene, and he's doing some hip hop tracks as well. And I made a new beat for him, which sounds pretty cool in my opinion. So that was a lot of fun to make, because hip hop is like after hardcore, it's my favorite style. Sometimes experiment with some raw style, hardstyle as well. More close to the music that I already do. I try different styles in the studio, just if I don't have any hardcore inspiration, or I don't feel like to make a hardcore track and I feel like to do something else, I go low BPM, or I do, it's just to keep yourself motivated and inspired, and maybe it's a challenge to try something different, because like I said, I've been doing it for 20 years, hardcore music, which is still awesome, but sometimes you like to try something else. I like to collab with other artists. It can be, you can always learn something new, especially, sometimes if someone lives far away and you collab with someone and you only do it on the internet, so he just sends some audio files and you send some audio files to him and it's back and forth. It's still cool, but you can really get some new ideas and new inspiration when you're with someone in the studio together making a track. And this I like the most about collaborations. So, and when you really go out of the scene, lately I've been doing a collab with Reinier Sonneveld, which was like 150 BPM, real full-on hard techno, which I've never done before. This inspires me as well. And I'm really thinking about maybe trying to find more artists who are into it. I want to do a collaboration from different genres to get a different perspective on the making music. I don't really have a filter when it comes to popularity or something like that. When I make collaborations with other guys or girls or whatever, if I like someone's music, doesn't matter how many followers or whatever. This all doesn't matter. It's just if I like someone's tracks, we can do a collab. It doesn't matter if they're famous or not. If you're working with someone who uses a different DAW, and if you're in their studio, it basically means you're on the seat beside the main seat. So because you're not familiar with the program, and I mean, you can still, of course, I mean, you're constantly giving your input and saying what you like and what kind of elements you want to be used. What is a good producer for me is someone who has a unique style and has proper sound design, proper mix master, who you can hear has confidence in the studio, knows what they want. The most important thing is that you have your own style, that there is a certain atmosphere in the track that really stands out from the rest. I don't really have a ritual, as in before my set, that I have to do certain things or a certain procedure or something like this. I just check what kind of event I'm playing, what kind of other artists are in the lineup. Is it like a more commercial event or is it the more underground event? And then I go into Rekordbox and I decide what kind of tracks I want to play at home before I go to the party. So I just, of course, I mean, I know if it's a more commercial event and I'm closing a hardstyle stage or closing an EDM stage or whatever, I choose different tracks that if I'm playing on Master of Hardcore or playing on a Thunderdome or whatever, which are like proper hardcore events. So I adapt my playlist to this, but I don't really have an actual ritual or something. When I started playing, I remember I was stressed out a lot. I wasn't comfortable in the booth. I was struggling because in the beginning I was playing with vinyls still. There were no CD players yet, which makes life a little bit easier. And I didn't really practice that much at home. Also, I was mostly focused on making music. So, but by the time the weekend came, I was starting to get nervous again because I didn't practice. And it was a difficult thing to start to play with vinyls if you're not that experienced. But throughout the years, DJing has become easier because of the CD players, the USB players. And I started to feel more comfortable on stage. I don't know if it's related to DJing becoming more easier or just get used to the fact that I'm standing in front of a lot of people. Even if it's on a big stage, I don't feel any anxiety or something like this. I just feel comfortable on stage. I think it's also visible. If I see the videos now compared to when I started, I can see that I'm more comfortable now if you compare it to the early days. When I perform in front of thousands of people, the most important thing for me is the front line. So the first fence is usually because there's like such an enormous amount of people and you cannot focus on all these people. And mostly what I focus on is the front line. And which is mostly the real Angerfist fans are always in front. So with the flags, the masks, the tattoos and everything. So if they go crazy, then I'm having a good time and I'm having a good set. And mostly I focus on those guys. What makes a good DJ set, in my opinion, is proper build-up. So not going 200 BPM and 200 BPM. You start slow, you start building up. I usually notice that this works also. The people appreciate this more, you know. You don't go full in. You don't go all in the beginning. You just start slow, start building up. Higher BPMs, more aggressive music throughout the set. When I see DJs playing that are scratching or doing crazy tricks or playing 3 players at once, this is cool. And this is what makes them unique. And this is also what makes a good DJ set, in my opinion. Core of a good DJ set for me is a proper build-up and I guess telling kind of a story. If you want to stand out now and you don't want to make any mistakes, how can you make mistakes? I mean, you try to be unique. You can wear a mask as a DJ, but a billion DJs have done this already before. This doesn't mean that you will get success. You need to perform in the studio and make something that is quality, that is good, and that has a vibe to it, an energy to it, atmosphere. For me, that is still right on top. If you have a good atmosphere in the track, this is what can create a hit or can make you stand out from the rest. What kind of mistakes you shouldn't make, in my opinion, if you're an upcoming artist, and even though you're not famous yet, or maybe you are already getting famous, or you're getting a hype around you, don't be an asshole. Don't be arrogant to your fans. Walk away straight after your set. I mean, these are the people that come to see you. Most of the times I do photo sessions after my sets. I meet with guys, make pictures with guys, girls, whatever, and meet with the fans. And it's not like it has to be like this. It just comes naturally. These are the people that come to see me. Without them, I'm nothing. So if you are an artist and you have one hit and you start to act like an asshole, you're making a big mistake. And it happens a lot. I've seen it around me, newcomers walking around like this, trying to be the big boss, even though they had one hit out, and trying to walk around like the big boss, ignoring their fans. In the end, besides for your career, it's just an asshole thing to do. You should respect your fans, in my opinion. But besides that, it will also not be good for your career, because in the end, if you lose just a little bit of fame, people will drop you and they will not respect you anymore. They will not book you anymore, because it's also artists that are assholes to organizations or promoters or whatever, just because they have that little bit of fame. To me, that's no go. I think producers do need a platform like WeTweak to find ideas, get inspiration. You don't lose time. You don't focus on the wrong things. You have a user-friendly center for samples, MIDI files, whatever, where you can go to and just, get inspired, and you don't lose time and you don't lose focus on stuff you shouldn't be focusing on. And that can kill your inspiration and kill your vibe in the studio. So basically the essence is not to lose time and focus on things that you shouldn't be spending time and focus on in the first place. And that's why we need a platform like WeTweak. Why I joined WeTweak is because it has a transparent, proper platform, user-friendly. It's something that I'm happy to commit to, transmit some of that knowledge that I gained throughout the years, give it to a new generation of producers. Maybe are struggling in the studio, trying to find some certain sound and they can't fix it and they can't do it. And I would be happy to provide some sounds, ideas, stuff like that for them to make, life in the studio a little bit more easier. I have a few anecdotes from the past 20 years that were really standing out from all the others. Once I did a small tour in India, and the promoter, very nice guy, he booked me. And I did Bangalore, I think it was Mumbai and some other gigs. I had to go to Hyderabad. We came, and it was not a club, but it was a restaurant. A DJ booth, very small. There was a dance floor that was maybe 2 by 2 meters. Around that were just tables, people eating food. So the guy said, okay, it's your time. It's your time. You can go to the booth. So I went to the booth and I started playing for people who were just eating steak in India. But this was like a high-end fancy restaurant. I don't know why they booked me, but they booked me, and I was playing hardcore music in front of a fancy restaurant with. In the beginning, when I started, there was one person on the dance floor. At the end of the second track, she left, and there was nobody. And during the breaks of the tracks, I heard the sound of the knife and fork scratching on the plates. This was one of the most terrible things. Also, another anecdote, me and Radical Redemption did an album tour. We were releasing albums around the same time. So we did like an album tour in Austria. There was a fridge backstage, a huge plate of Jägermeister bottles. And we found out about it. We drank it all, the whole crew, all the DJs, and got so wasted that eventually it was a very high stage. I fell off the stage, which was a couple of meters high, landed on my back, couldn't walk anymore because of the pain, and dragged along one of the stage lights, which was like this huge 40-kilo stage light. And it dropped like 10 centimeters next to my head. So if it would have dropped just a little bit to the right, I wouldn't be here. And then the ambulance came. They picked me up because I couldn't walk anymore. They dropped me off at the hotel. First, they went to the hospital, checked me out. Didn't have anything broken. Then they put me into the hotel. I had to book an extra day. I couldn't walk anymore. And I had to do the next weekend. I had 5 gigs in Holland, and I had to do them all on crutches because I couldn't walk anymore. And I was in excruciating pain through all these gigs. There's one more anecdote, which is funny to share, that once we did an Angerfist live act at Master of Hardcore. We had to close the night, I think, if I remember correctly. I did a stage dive and nobody caught me. So I was going full on running into the crowd, trying to do a stage dive, jump onto the people, and they would move me around the crowd like a proper stage dive. But everybody went on the side and I dropped like a couple of meters down on the floor. I was just lying there like in fetus position, After that, I've done many stage dives after that, but there was always the fear of people not catching me, So yeah.